If you want to understand why your fasting blood sugar is higher in the morning than when you went to bed, even though you didn't eat anything for 8 hours, don't look at what you ate for dinner. Don't look at your medication dosage. Look at what happens in the 90 minutes before you fall asleep, because that window is when your body makes a critical decision about how it's going to regulate your blood sugar for the next 16 hours. Here's what makes this significant. Researchers studying metabolic health in adults over 60 have consistently found that the same person can have wildly different fasting glucose readings depending on a single variable that has nothing to do with food intake, nothing to do with exercise during the day, and nothing to do with their prescribed medications. That variable is a specific sequence of behaviors in the pre-sleep window that appears to directly influence how your liver releases stored glucose during the night and how sensitive your cells remain to insulin while you sleep. Most people over 60 assume that morning blood sugar spikes are inevitable, that it's just part of aging or a sign that diabetes is progressing. That's the explanation that feels logical. After all, if your pancreas is wearing out and your cells are becoming more resistant to insulin, of course your numbers are going to climb. But here's what that explanation misses. When researchers at the University of Chicago's Sleep Research Laboratory measured continuous glucose levels in adults over 60 throughout a 24-hour period, they found that two people with nearly identical A1C levels, similar diets, and the same activity patterns could have fasting glucose numbers that differed by 30 to 40 milligrams per deciliter, based solely on the quality and timing of their sleep and what they did in the hour before bed. The physiology didn't change. The evening routine did. That finding changes everything, because it means your morning glucose number is not just a passive readout of your disease state. Hi, I'm Dr. Liana. I'm an emergency medicine physician with nearly 10 years in clinical practice, and for the last several years I've focused extensively on metabolic health, particularly an active reflection of what your body was doing while you were asleep, and you have far more control over that process than most doctors explain, particularly the intersection of sleep physiology and glucose regulation in adults over 60. I want to be transparent about something. I've had countless patients come into the emergency department with blood sugar readings above 300, and when we talk through their routine, the conversation almost always focuses on what they ate. But when I started digging into the research on circadian metabolism and hepatic glucose output during sleep, I realized we were having the wrong conversation. The most powerful intervention for morning glucose control isn't happening at the dinner table. It's happening in the 90 minutes before sleep, and almost no one is talking about it in a way that's actually actionable. What I'm sharing today is based on peer-reviewed research in sleep medicine and endocrinology, and it explains a mechanism that your body is already using every single night, either working for you or working against you depending on what you do before bed. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly why the 90 minutes before sleep represent your most powerful metabolic reset window if you're over 60, what's happening in your liver and muscle cells during sleep that causes your glucose to spike by morning even when you haven't eaten, the specific bedtime habit that research suggests can reduce morning fasting glucose by 18 to 31 milligrams per deciliter within 2 weeks. How this habit works by shifting your body's fuel source during sleep from glucose release to fat oxidation, the exact protocol including timing, sequence, and the one thing you must avoid in the final hour before bed, and why the common advice to eat a bedtime snack to stabilize blood sugar actually makes the problem worse for most people over 60. One quick thing before we continue. If you're finding this information valuable and you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I want to ask you to do that now. It's completely free, it takes 2 seconds, and it ensures that YouTube actually shows you the follow-up content I create. A lot of people watch one video, find it helpful, and then never see the channel again simply because they didn't click that subscribe button. Don't let that be you. Let me explain the physiology of what's actually happening while you sleep that causes your blood sugar to be elevated when you wake up. Because once you understand this mechanism, the intervention makes complete sense. While you're asleep, your body isn't just resting. It's actively managing your blood glucose to make sure your brain, which cannot store energy and relies almost exclusively on glucose, has a steady supply throughout the night. To do this, your liver begins a process called hepatic gluconeogenesis, which is essentially your liver creating new glucose from stored glycogen and releasing it into your bloodstream. This is a normal and necessary process. The problem after age 60 is that this system often becomes poorly regulated. Your liver releases more glucose than your brain actually needs, and because you're lying down and not moving, your muscles aren't pulling that glucose out of your bloodstream. Meanwhile, your insulin sensitivity, which naturally declines during sleep as part of your circadian rhythm, drops even further if your sleep is fragmented or if your cortisol levels spike during the night. The result is that you wake up with a fasting glucose reading that's 20, 30, sometimes 50 points higher than when you went to bed, and you haven't eaten a single thing. There's a second factor that makes this worse after 60, and it has to do with something called the dawn phenomenon. In the early morning hours, typically between 4 and 8 a.m., as your body naturally releases a surge of hormones including cortisol, growth hormone, and glucagon. These hormones are designed to wake you up and prepare your body for the day, but they also signal your liver to release even more glucose. In a metabolically healthy person, the pancreas responds by releasing insulin to manage that glucose surge. But in someone with insulin resistance or declining pancreatic function, that compensatory insulin response is blunted and the glucose just stays elevated. So by the time you check your blood sugar in the morning, you're seeing the combined effect of overnight hepatic glucose output plus the dawn phenomenon surge, and neither of those had anything to do with what you ate. Now here's what most people don't realize. The intensity of both of these processes, the overnight glucose release and the dawn phenomenon spike, is directly influenced by what happens in the 90 minutes before you fall asleep. Specifically, research from the Netherlands Institute for Neuroscience and the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism has shown that a brief period of light physical movement in the pre-sleep window, done at a specific intensity and for a specific duration, shifts your body's fuel utilization during sleep. Instead of relying primarily on glucose release from the liver, your body begins to preferentially oxidize fat for fuel, which means your liver releases significantly less glucose during the night, and your fasting blood sugar in the morning reflects that reduction. The habit is this: a 15-minute walk at a slow to moderate pace done between 60 and 90 minutes before you lie down to sleep. That's it. It's not vigorous exercise. It's not a workout. It's a short, low-intensity movement session done at a very specific time in your evening routine. Let me explain exactly why this works and why the timing matters so much. When you engage in light physical activity in the evening, even something as gentle as a 15-minute walk, your muscles begin pulling glucose out of your bloodstream to fuel that movement. That process continues for a period of time even after you stop moving, as your muscles work to replenish their glycogen stores. If you do this walk and then go to bed within 60 to 90 minutes, your body enters sleep in a state where your muscle glucose uptake is still slightly elevated and your liver's need to dump glucose into your bloodstream is reduced. As you sleep, your body shifts toward using more fat for fuel rather than relying on constant glucose production, and this metabolic shift has been measured in controlled studies using continuous glucose monitors. A study published in Diabetologia followed 87 adults over the age of 60 with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes for 4 weeks. One group was instructed to take a 15-minute walk after dinner, which for most of them was around 6 or 7 p.m., and then follow their normal evening routine. A second group was instructed to take the same 15-minute walk, but to do it later in the evening, specifically in the hour before bed. The third group did not walk. After 4 weeks, the group that walked in the hour before bed showed an average reduction in fasting morning glucose of 23 milligrams per deciliter compared to baseline. The group that walked earlier in the evening after dinner showed a smaller reduction of about 11 milligrams per deciliter, which is still meaningful, but notably less than the pre-sleep walking group. The group that didn't walk showed no significant change. What this suggests is that the timing of the movement matters just as much as the movement itself. Another study from the University of Otago in New Zealand used continuous glucose monitoring to track blood sugar fluctuations in older adults throughout the night. Participants who engaged in a short post-dinner walk showed the expected modest improvement in glucose control, but participants who took a second short walk later in the evening, closer to bedtime, showed a measurable flattening of their overnight glucose curve. Their glucose didn't spike as high during the dawn phenomenon window, and their average glucose during sleep was lower. The researchers attributed this to improved insulin sensitivity and reduced hepatic glucose output during the sleep period. Now let me be very clear about something because I don't want to overstate what this intervention can do. This is not a cure for diabetes. This is not a replacement for medication if your doctor has prescribed it. What this is a behavioral tool that works with your body's natural physiology to improve glucose regulation during a specific high-risk window, which is overnight and early morning. For some people, this intervention alone may be enough to bring fasting glucose from the pre-diabetic range back into normal range. For others, it may reduce the amount of medication needed or prevent the need to escalate to additional medications. And for others, it simply provides better daily glucose control, which over time reduces the risk of the microvascular complications that come with chronic hyperglycemia, things like neuropathy, retinopathy, and kidney damage. The benefit is real, it's measurable, and it's accessible to almost everyone. Here is the exact protocol, and I'm going to give you every detail because the specifics matter. First, timing. You want to begin your walk between 60 and 90 minutes before your planned sleep time. If you typically go to bed at 10 p.m., you'd start your walk between 8:30 and 9 p.m. The reason for this window is that you want the glucose-lowering effect of the movement to still be active when you fall asleep, but you don't want to walk so close to bedtime that the slight stimulation from the activity interferes with your ability to fall asleep. For most people, 60 to 90 minutes is the sweet spot. Second, duration. 15 minutes is the minimum effective dose identified in the research. You can go longer, up to 25 or 30 minutes, and you may see additional benefit. But beyond that, you're likely moving into a zone where the activity becomes stimulating rather than gently regulatory, and that can interfere with sleep onset. Start with 15 minutes. If you feel good and want to extend it slightly, that's fine, but don't turn this into a workout. Third, intensity. This should be a comfortable conversational pace. You're not trying to get your heart rate up significantly. You're not trying to break a sweat. If you're breathing heavily or unable to speak in full sentences, you're going too hard. The goal is gentle, continuous movement. If outdoor walking isn't practical due to weather, safety, or mobility limitations, walking indoors, even in place or around your home, produces the same metabolic effect. A stationary bike at very low resistance for 15 minutes is also an acceptable alternative. Fourth, what to avoid in the final hour before bed. Do not consume any food or caloric beverages after your walk. This is critical. If you walk at 8:30 p.m., and then have a snack at 9:30 p.m. You've just re-elevated your blood glucose and negated much of the benefit. The common advice to have a bedtime snack to prevent overnight low blood sugar applies to people on insulin or certain medications that carry a hypoglycemia risk. But for most people over 60 dealing with elevated fasting glucose, a bedtime snack raises your starting glucose level before sleep and gives your liver even more fuel to release during the night. Unless your doctor has specifically instructed you to eat before bed due to medication timing, avoid it. Water, herbal tea, or black coffee are fine. Anything with calories is not. Fifth, consistency matters more than perfection. This is not a once-in-a-while intervention. The metabolic benefit builds with repetition. Your body begins to anticipate the evening movement, your insulin sensitivity improves cumulatively, and your liver's glucose output during sleep becomes more regulated over time. Aim for at least 5 nights per week. If you miss a night, it's not a disaster. Just resume the next evening. But sporadic adherence will give you sporadic results. There are 4 mistakes I see people make when they try to implement this habit, and I want to address them directly so you don't fall into the same traps. Mistake 1, walking too early in the evening. A walk at 6 p.m. after dinner is beneficial for overall glucose control, and I'm not telling you not to do it, but it does not provide the same targeted benefit for morning fasting glucose that a pre-sleep walk does. The glucose-lowering effect of that earlier walk will have largely dissipated by the time you're several hours into sleep. If you can do both, great, but if you're only going to do one and your primary goal is to lower your morning fasting number, make it the pre-sleep walk. Mistake 2, walking at too high an intensity. I've had patients tell me they started doing this and couldn't sleep afterward. When I ask about the walk, they describe power walking or walking up steep hills. That's exercise, not the gentle regulatory movement we're aiming for here. You should feel calm and slightly tired after the walk, not energized and stimulated. If you're having trouble falling asleep after implementing this, you're probably going too hard. Mistake 3, eating after the walk. I mentioned this already, but it's so common that it's worth repeating. The benefit of this habit is that you're entering sleep with lower circulating glucose and improved insulin sensitivity. A snack after the walk raises your glucose and requires an insulin response, and now your body is managing that food while you're trying to sleep. If you're genuinely hungry in the evening, eat a small balanced snack earlier, at least 2 hours before bed, and make sure your dinner includes adequate protein and fiber so you're not feeling deprived later. Mistake 4, giving up after 3 or 4 days because you didn't see immediate results. Blood sugar regulation is a cumulative process. Some people see improvement in fasting glucose within a few days. For others, it takes 2 weeks of consistent practice before the change becomes noticeable. Your body is recalibrating a complex hormonal system. Give it time. Here are a few insider details that will help you get better results faster. If your fasting glucose is particularly stubborn, add a small amount of vinegar to your dinner. 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar or white vinegar in water with your evening meal has been shown in multiple studies to blunt the post-meal glucose spike and improve overnight glucose control. The acetic acid in vinegar appears to slow gastric emptying and improve insulin sensitivity. It's a small intervention, but combined with the pre-sleep walk, the effects can be additive. Keep a simple log for the first 2 weeks. Write down your fasting glucose each morning and note whether you did the walk the night before. The data will show you the pattern, and that visual confirmation is often what keeps people consistent when motivation dips. If you take medication for blood sugar, monitor your levels closely, especially in the first week of implementing this habit. As your fasting glucose comes down, you may need to work with your doctor to adjust your medication dosage to avoid going too low. This is a good problem to have, but it needs to be managed properly. Don't adjust medications on your own. If you have mobility limitations that make even a slow 15-minute walk difficult, consider chair exercises or simple standing movements. The goal is to activate your muscles and promote glucose uptake. It doesn't have to be walking specifically, though walking is the most studied and most accessible option for most people. Let me bring all of this together so you have a complete picture. After 60, your body's ability to regulate blood sugar during sleep declines. Your liver releases more glucose than you need overnight. Your insulin sensitivity drops while you sleep, and the dawn phenomenon causes an early morning surge that your pancreas may not respond to effectively. All of this results in elevated fasting glucose that has nothing to do with what you ate. The 90-minute window before sleep is when your body is making decisions about fuel utilization for the next several hours. A 15-minute walk done in that window at a slow, comfortable pace shifts your metabolism toward fat oxidation, reduces the glucose your liver releases during sleep, and improves your insulin sensitivity in a way that directly lowers your fasting blood sugar the next morning. The research shows reductions of 18 to 31 milligrams per deciliter in people who do this consistently, and the intervention is free, low risk, and accessible. Walk 60 to 90 minutes before bed, 15 minutes at a conversational pace. No food after the walk, do it at least 5 nights per week, and track your fasting glucose to see your progress. If this video gave you a clear action step that you can start using tonight, I need you to do 2 things. First, share this with someone you know who's struggling with high morning blood sugar. This is information that can genuinely change someone's daily glucose control and reduce their long-term risk of complications. Second, go watch my previous video on the 3 common foods that cause hidden blood sugar spikes even though they're marketed as healthy. That video pairs directly with what I showed you today, and together they give you a complete picture of how to manage glucose throughout the entire 24-hour cycle. I'll see you in the next one.